Play. He definitely pulled up right there. Catch, no doubt whatsoever.
Creo que no me merezco terminar así. Creo que me he esforzado lo suficiente durante toda mi carrera deportiva como para que mi final no sea hoy aquí en una rueda de prensa, ¿no? Que mi final sea de otra manera y voy a esforzarme para que mi final sea de otra manera. Hola a todos. Después de un año fuera de la competición, ha llegado el momento de volver. Será en Brisbane y será la primera semana de enero. Nos vemos allí.
Wow, how about that for some dramatic music and emotion? At the end of the video, I like how he's got his head down and then he looks up to give us the information that Rafa Nadal, after 1 year away from competition, he will be returning to competitive tennis in about 5 weeks from now, a little bit less than 5 weeks from now. He says the first week of January, although I believe the Brisbane event gets underway on the 31st. So he may yet be, given his ranking, he may yet be drawn to play on the 31st of December. But he's in a good mood, right, James, I guess?
He looks like he's in a good mood. Of course, I don't understand a word of Spanish, so it was good. You know,
you don't need to know a lot. You don't need to know a lot to say that he's coming back.
He's coming back, and it's such a it's so good to see Rafa to be coming back. It was a real bit of an excitement, really. He's been gone for the entire year. He was quite actually, I don't know who he's paid as part of his marketing team to be able to put together that little clip, but for him to show, you know, the absolute pain he was in that match against Mackenzie McDonald, and you know, to be able to come back, you know, be able to come back from that, especially when it was looking a bit dicey. You know, we were going into the clay court season, you know, and him constantly saying, okay, I'm going to be here. And then we would then get those clips and those images of him at his academy, you know, with the sun at the background. You're like, oh no, here we go. Another one of these videos where he's going to be, saying he can't go to the next tournament, but he's hoping for the next. And we got that constantly from Monte Carlo, then to Barcelona, then to Madrid, then to Rome. And then it was like, actually, no, the entire season is a complete write-off. So for him now to actually be back, especially when we've been seeing little clips, little images that have been popping up on social media of him practicing. You know, some people were looking at his rallies and saying they were looking good in terms of his forehand and backhand, but then we were seeing some clips of his service motions, which weren't exactly looking the best, and that was only really a month or two ago. You know, he's not a man that will necessarily commit to something if he didn't feel like it was going to be possible to take place. So for him to have that inner confidence to then put together this snazzy little video saying he's going to be gracing the blue courts of Brisbane it's just, you know, absolutely brilliant to see.
We got a clue. I mean, we've had a few clues in recent weeks. I think somebody suggested, Carlos Moya has tweeted. He tweets about 3 times a year, and two of those tweets are related to like sponsorship commitments. So he's committed. He's shown a couple of hearts in a tweet. We got a few clues in recent days regarding the scheduled return. I mean, we've had lots of clues in the last few weeks that he plans to return at some point. But we got a clue about 4 or 5 days ago. I think a Spanish journalist said this is the planned return schedule, and it included and the timeline even included as detailed as practicing in Kuwait basically in December. And it then detailed how he would then go to Australia at the end of December with a plan to play Brisbane 250 and then on the Australian Open. So we had that clue, although that, you know, you've got to be skeptical with those. And it did say, look, this is the plan. But then we got a big clue last night. I didn't want to get too excited, but we got a huge clue last night when it was the Brisbane International tweeted, big news coming tomorrow. And it was, I'll see if I can find the tweet that they sent. Yeah, here we go. So They sent a tweet at about, I don't know, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, Central European time. And it was basically then deleted. Okay, so Brisbane International, this is obviously the tournament. He's said, we've got big news coming tomorrow. They deleted it. I don't know if somebody from the Rafa team said, get that down. We're supposed to be breaking this. Or we don't know yet. Or they just didn't like the wording of the tweet. Well, a couple of hours later, it returned. And it was basically getting set for a big announcement. In the meantime, sit back, relax, and enjoy some court surfacing in Brisbane. So that was all very amusing last night. And I still didn't know if they were doing a sort of a Craig Tiley on us or whatever. But it does appear that he'll be back in Brisbane, at least as long as the next 4 or 5 weeks goes to plan. And let's rewind about 12 months, though, to the period that you're referring to when it sort of begins to unravel in Melbourne a year ago. Of course, we got a 6-week timeline, didn't we, James, for that initial injury? I think it was 6 to 8 weeks, and we were thinking, I wonder if that means he'll be back for Indian Wells. Well, 12 months later, and he still didn't return. You mentioned that sort of period in the summer where it was like delay after delay after delay. And then we got that press conference, of course, in May, I think end of May, basically, or middle of May, basically saying I think it was during the tournament in Rome, funnily enough, where he like, okay, we're not going to be doing the French Open, but we're also not going to be doing anything this year. I think he did touch upon a potential return at the Davis Cup, but Spain didn't qualify. And Jethro, what are your first thoughts on what we've just heard?
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. James and John, nice to see you guys. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Jethro.
Very excited. Obviously not really sure what to expect. What's kind of what I'm just concerned about the movement for when he comes back. But I've seen some hitting videos and he looks as strong as ever. So excited, but not I suppose not expecting too much heading into next year. Just gonna kind of see what we get and try and get the most out of it, really, because we don't know how much longer he's gonna be playing for.
I mean, you mentioned some of these practice videos. It's almost impossible to give an accurate prediction on those. But I will say that my casual observing eyes, they look better than they did in April, May, when we saw some of the practice videos there. Also, during that period, he wasn't serving. No, you won't see a single practice serve from him in the period of April, May, and March. Even when we saw him practicing, he was practicing behind closed doors. Somebody once said to me, "Oh, that's kind of normal for Rafa." No, it's as we've seen from these videos that have been coming out the last 4 weeks. Actually, a lot of the time he practices not behind closed doors. At least he'll let the cameras in for a minute or two, and then the rest of the time would be behind closed doors. But that said a lot to me then, and it also said a lot to me that he wasn't doing so this time. James, what can we expect when he does take the court in Brisbane, and then of course Melbourne if all goes to plan?
Well, I certainly think we won't be seeing like peak Rafa at all, or at least like Rafa we were used to at the well, certainly, leading up to Wimbledon 2022. I think, as Jeffro points out there, in terms of movement, it still will be probably quite restricted at points. I don't think we'll be seeing him covering all elements of the court as what we're used to, from both sides to another. I do think we'll probably it'll take him a couple of matches, like any player, really. It takes a couple of matches, really, just to be able to get almost like your line of sight in sorted when it comes to both your forehand and your backhand side. But I expect that part of his game to be the quickest to get back up to speed. But as what's been pointed out in terms of with the serving, that may take the longest to actually get back up to any degree of competitibility. We could see a situation with a lot of Rafa's matches where, when it comes to his opponent's service games and potentially returning, which has always been a good part of his game, and when it comes to rallying, he may be able to break his opponent on a fair few occasions. But when it comes to his own service games, he could be incredibly vulnerable through the Brisbane tournament and also going into the Melbourne tournament. But but similarly, it depends on, of course, on how his draw goes and in terms of the number of players he gets to play. Of course, he'll hope he'll be able to do something similar to what he did 2 years ago at the Melbourne Somerset tournament in 22, where he got basically a range of fairly easy-ish opponents that gave him a few matches on the court, which then meant he won that title, picked up that weird glass boomerang, and then was able to go on to Melbourne with that confidence of winning a 250 when everyone else was playing United Cup or wherever or ATP Cup, that it was called back then. And then was able to then really hit the ground running in Melbourne quite well and go on and win the title. But yeah, granted, like I said, I think what we'll see is his forehand and backhand will be the quickest thing to get back up to speed, but his serve and his movement will be the thing that we'll have to follow on afterwards. And we probably are going to expect to see a lot of Rafa service games where he gets broken a fair bit.
I think there's been one or two comments in the chat. Why is he coming back? Brisbane? Well, it's just simply the calendar. I mean, it's just if you are 99 or 100% sure you're going to play, or if you're 100% sure you're going to play the Australian Open, then play in the same similar conditions in the same country, time zone, blah blah blah. Get out there as soon as you possibly can, and surfaces hopefully similar. I think there are different court speeds, of course, but there does tend to be a little bit more similarity, of course, between courts in the same country. Not just to jump in, sorry, no, when it comes to it, it's the perfect place to do your warm-up tournament. I mean, the player that has played a warm-up tournament literally like 2 weeks prior to the Australian Open the last 2 years has ended up winning it, and that was Novak last year winning in Adelaide and then going on and winning in Australian Open, and then Rafa on screen here winning the Melbourne Somerset before going on and winning the Australian Open as well. It's a very good form of preparation is to hit Brisbane this time around, or Adelaide as it was last year. I actually think it's probably better than the United Cup because you're sort of less reliant on teammates to give you match practice, and also there could be. I think it would depend. I think Novak and Rafa can probably cope with this, but other players, if they have an emotional roller coaster to winning or just missing out on the United Cup, I think that could be quite draining. Ahead of playing a Grand Slam. But also there's questions about why somebody says, why is he not playing United Cup? Well, he doesn't qualify because of his rankings, about 2,691 in the world rankings. I think Jethro is about to come past him actually in the world rankings right now.
Not before you, John. No, I think you're much far ahead of me.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on expectations for Rafa, Jethro?
I can't remember who. It was some former player said he doesn't think Nadal's going to be challenging for Grand Slams. I think that's probably fair. I really don't think we can expect too much. He wants to kind of go out on his own terms, but if he stays fit for the whole year and he's playing really well, then he may well continue. So it's all quite up in the air. But I mean, if he gets a good draw in Brisbane in Australia, he can win some matches for sure. But yeah, as I said earlier, I think the movement's going to be really big because before he got that hip injury, his movement was terrible due to the ab injury. He was losing to kind of Tommy Paul and Taylor Fritz. On the regular in the indoor hard court season, just before the season started. So yeah, that's the main concern. Obviously, he's had a lot of time to heal now, the hip, and the abs should hopefully be fine by now. But I think a lot depends on the draw, to be honest.
Yeah. You mentioned the movement and stuff. I mean, listen, I think if he wasn't fully committed to this, if he wasn't sure that he feels good, that doesn't mean that 2 matches later he doesn't break down again. That is a possibility that has to be countenanced. But if he didn't feel like I'm ready to play 3 weeks of tennis on a different continent and all the rest of it, 3 weeks, that's maybe a little optimistic, if you know what I mean. I'm thinking, what I'm thinking about. But
is that Coulon Classic he's going to get himself into at the final set?
yeah, he's going to do a couple of challenges as well as Brisbane. Then I think he would keep his powder dry. He'll go, you know what? I think I still probably just need a few more weeks on the practice course. And then he would be avoiding we're talking about joints and we're talking about the hip and potentially the foot as well. you would probably want to avoid the hard courts and come back on the clay, which is, a lot more sliding around on a lot softer surface, which is a lot easier on the joints. So I think, we can see him practicing the last few weeks on hard courts. We knew, therefore, that he wasn't sliding around on the clay thinking about a March or April return. He was optimistic and hopeful of a January return, and that's what it's going to be in Brisbane. I think it makes total sense. It could be, if we just look at the next few weeks, it could be anything from he breaks down in training in Kuwait. As I say, he's going to get to Kuwait for a training block, then head back to Spain, and then head to Australia. Any point in the next 30 odd days, we might see images of him on a practice court, and it's just too much too soon, or it's maybe not going to happen at all, at least in a competitive environment such as a slam. That is the extreme negative scenario. The positive scenarios range from he has a good Brisbane tournament, he wins a couple of matches and loses in 3 sets to Davidovich Fokina. Although Davidovich Fokina will probably be playing. I don't know why I just thought of Davidovich Fokina, just the first. I was just trying to think of somebody about 30 in the world. Or he loses to Dominic Thiem, Jethro, in the final of Brisbane, in a rematch of many of their classic.
I wouldn't mind that at all. Or Schwartzman,
I was just watching their match sort of semi-randomly over the course of a few weeks in various chunks. Their match in Australia in 2020, and wow, what an insane 4-set rather than 5-set match, but in so many ways it had characteristics of a 5-set match.
That was amazing.
I think a lot of people.
That's a good one. Although I guess Lehetska will be playing United Cup. But anyway, go on. Sorry, James, I cut you off.
I think a lot of people would like a Murray Rafa match as a potential final in Brisbane, as both of those two are playing that tournament, and that would be a brilliant throwback. The battle of the 35 plus somethings
with dodgy hips, or one with a metal hip, one with a dodgy one.
That would certainly be a roll back the calendar event.
Dare I say it would be an event for the hipsters? Oh dear, Jethro, you're starting to regret coming on this show.
Time to end the stream.
Yes, so there's all sorts of listen. He could have a half decent return in Brisbane, and I think decent would be anything between winning 1 and 4 matches. It might only be 4 you need to do to win the tournament. I think he won 3 to win that Melbourne. I know he had a withdrawal en route to winning that Melbourne 250. So I'm not sure if he won 3 or 4 matches to win that title. But I mean, of course, it depends on the competition, depends on who's playing there. There's probably quite thinned out, because I think there's 2 or 3 250s at the same time. There used to be one in India, although I think it's now moved to Hong Kong. And there may well be another one in Australia or New Zealand at the same time, as well as the United Cup. So that's one scenario. And then, of course, he goes to Melbourne and maybe gets a nice draw and a couple of straight set wins and gets to rounds 3 or 4. And then we just see that even Rafa Nadal's limitations do have a limit. And then his calendar.
I'm just having a look. Sorry, I can already see. I was just scrolling through Brisbane International's Twitter or X feed. Ben Shelton's committed to there. So is Grigor Dimitrov, Holger Rune, of course, Andy Murray. It's not going to be a very easy
pretty
field.
Competitive. As soon as you said Ben Shelton, I was like, oh, okay. On the hard courts, especially if they're quite speedy. And I think Melbourne certainly is one of the faster hard courts. That might not be good news for Rafa, and it might be very
Rune would be terrible first round as well.
Rune as well. I would kind of see Rune there as well. Yeah. So maybe win a set, Rafa. Let's maybe tone this down.
I don't see him being any of them except maybe Andy. But if Andy, because it'll be the start of the season, Andy will probably be in pretty good form again. Because I think Murray just burnt out towards the end of the year.
I wonder if there'll be a few hot balls in there in the drawer to try and make sure Rafa avoids. Don't touch that one. That's Rune. Don't touch that one. Andy, that'll do. Although if we can find the qualifier or the Australian wildcard who's ranked 600 in the world, maybe Hichikata. Although I know he's ranked a lot higher.
Give him Ghostie's favorite mulch out. I'm sure Rafa would sweep him in no time at all.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then on he goes. I mean, and then the Australian Open itself, as I say, it could be, probably there's a train of thought that could be, you know what? I don't think fans ever think like this, and Rafa won't ever think like this, but there's a train of thought of, let's just get through those few weeks unscathed. Let's just win a couple of matches and the body is still fine, and then we kick on for the clay court season. I mean, there's Indian Wells. He said in his press conference in May that he would like to, he suggested that 2024 be his last year. He didn't commit to that, but he did suggest it may well be. And he would like to revisit some of the epic tournaments in his career. And I think Indian Wells fits that box, whereas Miami doesn't. He's never won Miami, and I don't think he ever will. I actually don't think he'll ever play Miami again. He didn't even have it on his schedule in 2022. When he was, at least when he was making that schedule, he was fit and firing. Of course, it was Indian Wells where he got a rib injury, and then all sorts of other things happened. So I don't think we'll see him in Miami no matter what. But I think if he's unscathed from those few weeks down under, I do think he may well plan to do Indian Wells. Why not? He might not. I don't think he'll do Acapulco. I think he'll just go into Indian Wells and see what he can do. James?
I think, and this is maybe a little bit of thing to put money on. I think he'll do the Golden Swing. I think
yeah.
I think certainly Rio, because it's been a place that which he's played at points in his career, especially when he's been coming back from injury. I think in 2015 he went to Rio and won the competition there. And certainly, he's got a huge base, as we noted when he went and did that tour with Casper Ruud in South America last year. That there's a huge base of Rafa fans down there. That certainly something going to doing like a Buenos Aires and a Rio could certainly be on his cards. And as you say, then go to Indian Wells, in which he's had some success. Take 2 weeks off to get ready to play on the clay, and then hit Monte Carlo.
Yep. That is a possibility. I'm just looking at some nice images of him in Rio. It's probably been almost 10 years since he did play there. At least on his body, it won't be too bad. And we saw Alcaraz getting prepped down in that part of the world a year ago, and that didn't do him any harm as he went on to win, of course, Indian Wells. I remember the interview he gave on Spanish TV 2 or 3 months ago. And he did say in that interview that, he just didn't know, and he still seemed a bit glum at that point. That was before I think he ramped up the intensification of his practices. I think it was probably maybe end of August, beginning of September. No, maybe middle of September that interview happened. And he said more news will emerge in November. And he has been giving us information over the last 4 weeks, and then none more so than with today's announcement. But he did say something very interesting in those interviews he gave. And it was kind of talking about, the schedule for next year. And he says he has no idea, but it will depend on his body, as he often says. But he was actually referring to sort of the clay court swing with Barcelona and Madrid and Monte Carlo and Rome, where these are places that he would probably like to tick off, but they all come in quick succession, as in like if it was a sort of a farewell tour. But he made an interesting point that was buried very, very far below, and understandably so than a lot of the other comments he gave at that point. But he said, actually, it depends on my body. And he didn't mean as in like, if I'm feeling fit and healthy, I will play all those tournaments. Because actually, he suggested that if he was feeling fit and healthy, you might not see him at those tournaments because he thinks he has a chance at the French. So again, we're getting a few months down the line, assuming we have a sort of, as I say, a healthy few months at the beginning of the year. But if you see him picking and choosing Barcelona and Madrid and so on and so forth, if you see him sort of selecting not to play Rome, I actually think that means he thinks he has a chance of going far in Roland Garros. And if this was Roland Garros coming up in January rather than Australia, I still think we'd have him in a mix among 8 until we actually saw him on court. You might then dismiss him from a mix of possible winners, but you would want to see him on court, because if he ever turns up in any way, shape or form at the French, as long as he's not playing Alcaraz or Djokovic in the first couple of rounds, then you're thinking, well, he's always got a chance. So I think that was a very interesting point that he made, that I don't think, because if we see him ticking off Barcelona, Madrid and all those, it might well mean he doesn't think he can win the French. Does that make sense, Jethro?
Yeah, I mean, he'll definitely play Barcelona unless something catastrophic happens. He'll definitely play there. Obviously, court named after him. I think, what was that, the second tournament he's won the most after the French? Or was it Monte Carlo?
He's won double figures in Rome, Monte Carlo, and Barcelona, I think. And I think it's either Monte Carlo or Rome he's won the most, because I think Barcelona's 10, but I could be wrong. They're all double figures anyway.
So, but he'll definitely play there. Yeah, no, I agree with your reasoning. I mean, Madrid doesn't really suit him anymore.
It doesn't, but it's a kind of farewell. If he plays Madrid, it might be that's an indication.
Maybe. Yeah. I can't see him wanting to play Madrid if he just because I just don't see him doing
it's one of the worst dichotomies for Rafa in this one, is that he is Spanish and would want to go to Madrid, but as we know, Madrid is not the best place to go to prep for the French Open. Rome is the best place, but Rome is not in Spain; it is in Italy. And so he's either damned if he does, or damned if he do, and damned if he doesn't. When it comes to whatever he picks with those two tournaments, because you say Rome is one of his best ever Masters, yet it isn't the Spanish one, and the Spanish one he's kind of mayor on because it's all the way up in the mountains.
A guy from the ATP told me, sorry, Jethro, I'll come to you in a second. A guy from the ATP told me when I was in Barcelona, which would have been, I guess, end of April. So this just comes just after Monte Carlo. He had booked practice courts in Monte Carlo as in April of last year. So his hope, at least a week before the tournament, was to go to Monte Carlo and play the tournament. And I think he had those concerns and thoughts and doubts about all of the clay court tournaments. And that's why he kept sort of saying, I won't be here every couple of weeks. Because he thought it might happen. But he was thinking to himself, a 40 or 60%, Rafa just isn't going to work at any of these tournaments, least of all the French. And therefore, he took this plan of action. I mean, is it wild, Jethro, to make any sort of Roger Federer comparisons compared to 2016 when he wrote off the second half of his season and then came back and had an unbelievable 2017?
I can't. Obviously, it's not going to be quite the same because Djokovic was, nowhere to be seen. Nadal obviously had also come back from a wrist injury.
Yeah,
and he was kind of up there competing with Roger in that season, but. So it's not going to be the same. Obviously, Djokovic is top dog, and then you've got Sinner and Alcaraz who are right on his heels. So I think Murray, broke his body in that after that 2016 season, fighting to be the best in the world, really. So when Federer came back in 2016, their kind of competition wasn't anywhere near what it is now going into the next season. So not only has Rafa got to deal with Djokovic still dominating tennis, he's got to deal with Alcaraz, he's got to deal with Sinner, he's got to deal with Rune, and all these other guys playing really, really well. So, but but in the same sense, he could have that kind of comeback where he's revitalized and he's in really, really great shape and he's playing well and he's a contender at all these tournaments again.
I mean, I certainly think clay court tournaments he could. I don't think it's fanciful to suggest he could be a contender at every clay court tournament he plays, especially as he'll have a few months under his belt. But this is again assuming that the next 4 or 5 months go well. Yeah, no, I mean he's still if he stays fit, he'll still be probably top 3 contender at French, in my opinion, because I've written him off before, and if he has 5 months of healthy tennis where he's winning matches, he doesn't even need to win a tournament before the French, and he would probably go in among top 3 or 4 contenders. There's a point here from Sean about maybe needing to try and beef up the serve. Well, I think he needs to beef up full stop. He looks kind of gaunt in that video at the end. They're very, very slim looking, Rafa. But that's to come perhaps. But on top of that, there are certain things that he might, like Sean says, beef up the serve. It was something that Carlos Moya has been praised for when he joined the team of improving Rafa's serve in that sort of 2016, 2017 period before we had a renaissance from both him and Roger. But he might also look at other elements of his game, trying to finish points a little bit earlier, trying to take the ball a little bit earlier. I mean, he's not well known for taking it early, although he is known for, in my book at least, for at least having a lot of variety on his return position, unlike many other players. But he does mix that up a lot, no matter who he's returning from, on no matter what court. I remember a match in Paris-Bercy that he lost to Zverev in 2020, where actually it was by the end of the match, he was returning first serves very close to the baseline. He said he regretted not doing that sooner. So anyway, Ghosty's here sort of saying, can he even do that at this late stage? I think it's just referring to coming back and winning tournaments. I think an optimistic, not the extreme optimism, James, but an optimistic scenario for the next few months is that he does win a tournament, that he does win a Barcelona or an Estoril or a Rio and I'm mentioning these sort of 250s and 500s on clay. I think, and he does have runs at other tournaments. That's not the extreme optimism, but it's one of the more optimistic lines. What are your thoughts, James?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I always think about is the quite recent example of what would happen at the back end of 21 going into 22. It almost looked like, was that going to be the end of Rafa? And then he goes into Melbourne, and then all of a sudden, I say all of a sudden, but it was like, actually, no, he can win tournaments, and then he went on and did what he did at the first half of 22. So, looking at recent examples of where we think his body has completely let him down and that he's gone, he's shown the absolute polar opposite. But we are then in a situation though where he is very, very now late into his 30s, 38 years of age. I mean, when we look at when Roger Federer won his last Grand Slam, it was at literally this point of his career at 38 years of age at the Australian Open. And you kind of would say if he was ever going to do it at any stage of his career, one last chance, it would be now if he was going to be able to go on and be able to actually win titles and potentially even challenge for Grand Slams. I mean, as we can probably gather from interviews that Rafa's done or teams or parts of Rafa's team has said, is that if he doesn't feel as though he's going to be competitive in winning slams, he would probably just sack it all in and say, that's it, I'm over, I'm done. Mm-hmm. He clearly feels as though there is still a potential chance that he could pick up a Australian or a French or a US title once again. Okay, maybe past it now on grass for Wimbledon, but certainly he certainly feels as though he's got the ability in him still, and his body is in the situation where he could just about get it over the line in his mind. So I would say, can he still do it? Optimistically, yes, he could probably still do it. Is it probable given the current field and given what's now I don't know what the title of them now, Baby Gen, I think is something people are now calling them in terms of Sinner, Alcaraz, Rune and whatnot. They're much stronger than what the next gen players were when Rafa had to come back beforehand.
If only there was a video out there on YouTube where maybe his uncle spoke about how he envisaged his nephew's retirement. Oh, hello there. I think there is actually. I think I've just found one on a YouTube channel called Talking Tennis, actually. So make sure you give that a check out. I think it's about 3 or 4 minutes into the video where he talks about it, and he touches on some of the things that you just mentioned there, James, about he won't. He mentioned last year about a farewell tour. I think many people scoffed at that, understandably, and thought that just can't work that way. It would probably be just 1 or 2 tournaments and I'm out. And it might be Barcelona and Monte Carlo and the French and see you later. But I think the plan right now is to try and win tennis matches and be competitive. I think we should probably just bring this to a close because I think there's not a lot more that we can add. But some closing thoughts from both of you. We'll begin with Jethro on this. I hope you had a nice lunch, by the way, and I apologize that we've disrupted your break in your day. But yeah, just some thoughts on the next sort of 12 months and retirement and concerns and hopes and wishes for Rafa.
Well, I guess if he does find himself in a position where he's competitive at the top of the game, maybe he won't call it a day. When he first made his announcement, I think he was very emotional and it sounded very much like he was gonna call it quits after this year. But I think it's so open right now. Like we have no idea what's gonna happen this season. So if he has an amazing year, then he might stay on for another year, or stay on until the French Open next year. I know the Olympics is this season as well, so he'll want to, and he's even expressed interest at playing doubles with Alcaraz at the Olympics this year, which would be amazing, obviously. So yeah, there's just a lot of unknowns, but as a fan of his, I just hope he's fit. I just hope he's healthy. Hope he's happy. Would love to see him being competitive, but health is number one. And if we can get some big wins and some titles with it, maybe another French Open, then I'd be very happy.
James?
Come out swinging, Rafa. Come out swinging, I think is my sort of final message. Play, have fun, play the best game that your body can possibly do. Play as many of the tournaments which you've had so much love and admiration with throughout the years, and make sure that if this is your final year, that you have absolutely no regrets in how you did it. Your ability, your body, certainly your ability. And what you can do is at the top of the game. It's the reason why he, at one point he did hold the most Grand Slam titles of any active or any male tennis player. All I want him to do is to come out swinging and have the best time he possibly can in this year. Take some big victories where you can, play some tight matches, entertain, play your brand of tennis. Don't do anything that compromises what you want, who you are, and let's see what happens this season.
James, I thought you were going to go into a rendition of All I Want for Christmas there. You said, all I want for, and then I was like, here we go. I have got another thing, actually, just to close us on, actually. Jethro, I think there's a certain Serbian called Novak Djokovic who I think is actually wants this and would be quite keen to. He said, I said last week, I think, I'd love to play Rafa one more time, but not on clay, which I know he was joking about it with to some extent, but I actually think he's probably right, because I think most of their last sort of dozen or so clashes have all come, or half a dozen clashes have all come on clay. And I think he'd like to preserve his winning head-to-head, which is 30-29, just an insanely. It just shows their rivalry in so many ways. But I think publicly, even he'll be quite. He's also got two in front right now in terms of the slam race, so it's probably not like he's one behind with the French on the horizon. Then I think he might be thinking differently. But I think the ATP Tour has missed Rafa, right, Jethro?
Yeah, of course. I think obviously Federer retired, and then we still have Nadal and Djokovic, and then Nadal had all these health issues for the last kind of year and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of just been Djokovic up there by himself, and it's just been Djokovic against anyone who can challenge him on their day. And it just brings a nice. It means that he's got someone who he's got history with. They're obviously probably arguably the best rivalry in any faction of tennis ever. So yeah, I mean, I think I've missed the rivalry for sure. As a Nadal fan, I certainly haven't missed the hardcore matches, but I think it is only fair we get a Djokovic beat down on hard at some point this season. I know that they've been waiting a very long time for that. His fans, so I'll let them have that one. We've still got 2020 French Open final when Ivanisevic said that Nadal didn't have a chance against Djokovic in those conditions.
Yes.
Lost in 3, got bailed in the first set. I was like,
yeah, that was probably one
that's
of
right.
Goran's less wise.
Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, I would love a Wimbledon match as well. Their 2018 one, is that most recent?
Yeah.
And that was amazing. It was quite a significant match, really, in terms of the slam race.
I think so. I think there was was there a passing shot for Novak at 30-40 on break point.
Mm-hmm. At 8 all or something like that in the fifth.
Yeah, I was just talking to Carlos about that last week. If you could define if Novak goes on to 26, 30 slams, and it probably won't be quite so defining, but certainly at this point, if there's one shot that changes the dynamic of that rivalry, then it might be that one, because if he misses that and Rafa breaks and serves it out, and ifs, buts, and maybes. Anyway, James, I think Novak will be happy, and I think the ATP Tour must be happy about this.
Absolutely, I think most, and of course, most importantly, most of the sort of tennis fans out there will be happy that we're going to get hopefully one more year, or at least a range of matches and a range of tournaments from them. Let's see what happens. He is probably the only person left one of the few people left on tour that can really challenge and go up against Novak, and it's what we want to see going into another season. We can't really, I'm probably going to get slated by a lot of not Djokovic fans for saying this, but we can't really have another season of a 36/37-year-old dominating the major events as we have this year.
Of course, there will be one or two other players that have something to say about Rafa's return, and also as a partner potentially, as Jethro did touch on earlier in Paris in the form of Alcaraz. So there's all sorts of pleasant retirement scenarios. Let's maybe finish on that rather than some of the unpleasant ones that could yet manifest itself. But I do think the final word, of course, must come from Rafa himself. As I love the tweet that Jethro put out earlier, which was words to this effect. Jethro was, thank goodness we've got a hola a todos with sort of a positive ring to it, rather than the sort of, particularly that sort of 4 or 5 week period between, I think, April and June, where every single hola a todos you knew it's, oh, he's not playing Rome. Oh, he's not playing Monte Carlo. He's not playing Barcelona. He did one where he ruled out Barcelona and Madrid. The others were all sort of individual. Before finally the crescendo, or the opposite of crescendo in a way, was with his press conference to say he wouldn't play the French or the rest of the year. But I think we'll close out with the same video that we played at the beginning, which was Rafa Nadal confirming he will be returning to the ATP Tour in around about a month from now in Brisbane. He didn't say this, but I'm saying it, with hopes and plans to play. I don't think he's just going to Australia to play Brisbane 250, win the tournament, and then say, see ya. That's where I want to. That's when he was asked the question the last 6 months. Where do you envisage your retirement place to be? See it in Brisbane. I reckon that's where I'll go. I'll go on a 25, 30 hour journey to Brisbane. Go and win the title. That'll prove who's the GOAT. Right. So I'll play Rafa's words out, and I'll see James and Jethro. Thanks for coming on, and see you again both very soon.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
He definitely pulled up right there. No doubt whatsoever.
Creo que no me merezco terminar así. Creo que me he esforzado lo suficiente durante toda mi carrera deportiva como para que mi final no sea hoy aquí en una rueda de prensa, ¿no? Que mi final sea de otra manera, y voy a esforzarme para que mi final sea de otra manera. Hola a todos. Después de un año fuera de la competición, ha llegado el momento de volver. Será en Brisbane y será la primera semana de enero. Nos vemos allí.